Yo, Fling here, and this is your Week 12 cash lineup review. Let's do it. All right, so over at Fantasy Labs for the $25 massive double up single entry to establish where the cash line was, about 135 points. So basically the top guys were, Jaden Daniels, Anthony Richardson, Geno Smith, and Bo Nix. These were, the main cash game quarterbacks that you would have saw across the slate. And this lineup here had a lot of cash plays, really. Bo Nix, Kareem Hunt, Brian Robinson Jr., Jackson Smith and Jigba, Cortland Sutton, kind of where I think it was a little bit different than what a lot of the field did was obviously Juwan Jennings and Trey McBride. So paid up at tight end, put Jennings in there with Brandon Allen, which definitely questionable, but hit the cash line, so it doesn't really matter. And then James Conner in the flex. So it was a 3 running back week. This lineup, surprisingly, did not have Devin Achane in it. That was a lot of 3 lineup builds. It was either Kareem Hunt, Brian Robinson Jr., and then it was either James Conner, or Devin Achane. So, those were the 3, but most of them had Devin Achane in them as he was the top owned guy on the slate, as we're going to see when we get to the chalkboard in a minute. And, Brian Robinson Jr. really kept a lot of lineups from cashing because he came in and got hurt right away. And then, tried to come back in the game, left the game, tried to come back in the game. And it didn't really matter because he ended up leaving the game. But this lineup, it didn't matter because he had Trey McBride, who scored 28 points and definitely was able to make up for the loss of Brian Robinson Jr. in that game. So that was the cash line. We'll go over to what I did in cash. And this was a rare week for me. I actually decided to play 2 cash lineups because I was really struggling on the 2 versus 2, deciding who I wanted to go with. And I liked them both enough that I felt like both of these lineups could certainly cash. And if they didn't, and, one kind of faltered, I would hedge a little bit. And that's exactly what ended up happening. I obviously don't have a crystal ball. Didn't know. I don't have the NFL script. Didn't know that Brian Robinson Jr. was going to get hurt, but I was really struggling between James Conner and Brian Robinson Jr. If I went with the James Conner lineup, that means I had to play Jacoby Myers, and I couldn't play Jackson Smith and Jigba, who actually I liked better on the slate than Jacoby Myers. But that would mean I would have to go pay down a little bit to Brian Robinson Jr. And I was just a little worried coming back if he was going to be splitting with Eckler, because Eckler had been playing so well, if he was going to get the full workload. So I decided to hedge a little bit. I liked a more balanced lineup this week. Either way, I was going with Amon-Ra as my top guy at wide receiver, Cortland Sutton and Jacoby Myers. I did not want to pay down punt wide receiver this week. I was going for more of a balanced build, and that's what Geno was allowing me to have. So either way, I was either going to end up with Amon-Ra St. Brown, JSN, and Cortland Sutton, or Amon-Ra St. Brown, Cortland Sutton, and Jacoby Myers. I like that balanced build. Ended up hedging a little bit. I won almost all my head-to-heads here with 149 points. With this lineup, with Geno, Achane, Hunt, Amon-Ra, Cortland Sutton, Jacoby Myers. Schoonmaker was a core for me. He was a guy that I had to have at 2,500. It was just too good of a spot. And then James Conner. And, really the 2 versus 2 of Conner and Myers versus Brian Robinson Jr. and JSN really ended up being a 3 versus 3 when you factor in the defense because, they weren't exactly all the same prices. So the Packers D also outscored the Bears D, and that ended up being a tremendous help. So this lineup scored 149 points. I won almost all my head-to-heads, and I really split it right down the middle with my head-to-heads. Half played this lineup, half played this lineup. And this lineup, surprisingly enough, which I guess it wouldn't be that surprising because you saw the cash line, 135 points. This lineup won some head-to-heads, lost the majority of them, but between the 2 lineups, I was able to be a slightly profitable day in cash. And, we'll go ahead and go to the chalkboard now. Obviously, Geno and Jaden were kind of the guys that we were on all week. Just looking at the matchups, seeing the fantasy points per game. They both had about 19 fantasy points per game. And, with Jaden, we weren't really sure because he hadn't looked the same since a rib injury. So I liked the pay down of Geno, and specifically with them about similar ownership and similar projection. Now, Anthony Richardson ended up getting a ton of ownership last minute, but I didn't want to swap over to that. I liked Geno a little better. And I think, I'm not even sure where Anthony Richardson ended up finishing on the day, but I think the right play was Geno or Jaden Daniels. I wasn't going to come off where we were with that. And then at running back, it was pretty clear. It was Kareem Hunt, Devin Achane as the top guys. Now, Kareem Hunt's score was completely fine for cash. 11 points. He's 5,700. Completely fine for cash. If you faded him in tournaments, you probably had a good day. If you played him in tournaments, you had a bad day. That's just how it went. Achane, 20 points. Great cash score. He was in the winning Millie Maker lineup as well. So it was also a tournament winning score. It was enough. It's really about what you did around them. And then Brian Robinson Jr., these were the top 3 owned guys with James Conner being in 4th. These were really the only guys we were considering in cash. And it was just based on the game environments and, their ownership and projections and fantasy points per game and whatnot. Brian Robinson Jr., if he does not get hurt, I'm sure he does very well, gets at least 10 points, and he gets to the cash line pretty comfortably. These things happen, and obviously it can be hard to stomach when one of your running backs gets hurt. But I think James Conner, really, as we saw, they were similar enough ownership and projection that it was really just deciding what wide receivers you wanted to play, because if you played Ryan Robinson Jr., you had to go a different way than if you play James Conner. So Cortland Sutton, Jacoby Myers were the top guys. It definitely felt like Jacoby Myers had a path to failing, but it's kind of what kind of scheme is Denver going to play? And they played a lot of Brock Bowers in that game. They had Patrick Surtain covering Brock Bowers because they didn't want to get killed by Brock Bowers. So they kind of just let Jacoby Myers, absorb a lot of targets, but he wasn't really hurting them in that game. And, he ended up having a great game because of it. 25 points is what he finished with. Sutton on the other side, Sutton got 29 points. So these guys both did very well, and you can see why they were the top one guys. And then Amon-Ra St. Brown, Detroit, they didn't score nearly as many points as you expected them to. And Amon-Ra St. Brown, 12 points. That's pretty much like the lowest for him. But you definitely would have wanted to see more. That said, he wasn't really the guy that crushed you. You kind of needed to play Jacoby Myers and Cortland Sutton, as we just saw here. If you played Jacoby Myers and Cortland Sutton with Amon-Ra, you did fine, right? So 12 points definitely wasn't enough to crash your cash lineup. And these were the top one guys for a reason. And JSN had a good day as well. So, the chalkboard really guided you the right way. The one spot that I did put in my cheat sheet that I was comfortable going off of the chalk is tight end. And I'm always comfortable doing that at tight end. I'm always looking for the pay down option because tight ends fail often. Travis Kelce failed at 5,800 and 19% ownership. So did Hunter Henry. So did Brock Bowers. Luke Schoonmaker, this was a spot, and we'll go to the cheat sheet. I didn't care what the chalkboard said. I had him as a core because he had gotten 10 targets the week before after Ferguson had gotten injured, and he was mispriced. He was priced as a backup, and he was not priced as a starter. So that was a core for me. It was too easy to play him there. And, we had listed Kelce because he was a top one guy, but Schoonmaker was the guy with the higher rating in the core attachment to him. Now, a quarterback, like I said, it was Jaden Daniels, it was Geno Smith. The Jaden Daniels earlier in the year would have been a lock for cash, but I actually like Geno a little bit better. They obviously both offenses really failed in that game. So the game environment ended up dudding and, didn't really work out, but he was still the highest owned. So it ended up, Geno and Anthony Richardson, it ended up being fine. Actually, Jaden Daniels, I think when it was all said and done, he didn't get that much ownership in cash from what we were seeing. Now, I had listed Christian McCaffrey in both Joe Mixon just because of the, type of volume these guys get, but it's pretty well spelled out in the cheat sheet. And, that's one of the things is we're not going to give out cash lineups. you're responsible for building your own lineup. We're going to kind of try to guide you in the right way of where you should build. But at the end of the day, it's your bankroll, it's your lineup. I had identified Devin A. Sean as a core in cash because I felt like he just has a much easier path to getting that cash floor at 7,500 and, piecing together the rest of your lineup so that you're not punting a wide receiver. You were able to get JSN or Cortland Sutton or Jacoby Myers by playing Devin A. Sean. And same thing with Kareem Hunt. He didn't have a great day, but still 11 points at 5,700. That was enough for cash, right? And James Conner got 9 points. Not great, not terrible. And then Brian Robinson Jr. got hurt. And, really, though, where we had the right plays, the best plays of the week was at wide receiver. So Nico Collins got 20 points. JSN, what he get 19 points. Cortland Sutton, 25 or 29. Jacoby Myers, 25. So we were really on the right plays at wide receiver. Even with Amon-Ra St. Brown, you were able to hit the cash line. And process-wise, it was a great spot for him. He was getting ownership. He had a great projection. He had averaged 20 fantasy points per game. They were going against an Indy team that gives up a lot of points, 29 points per game. So it was a pretty good spot. If you did need a punt, that would have been Kayshon Boutte, but didn't really feel like going there. And then it was a pay down of Packers and Bears D. And, Packers ended up being the better one. But they were both the pay down options, which is what we want to look for because it's so high variance. At defense, it's so high variance at tight end. So you want to look for those pay down options. And so you can lock in the higher price players at running back and wide receiver and quarterback. And so, I think overall, there were more hits and misses in the cash games. And, it would have been a really good week had Brian Robinson Jr. not got hurt, but still ended up being a slightly profitable week for me. And by the way, if you want access to the chalkboard, the Discord community where we post the notes, the final thoughts on Sunday, the cheat sheet that you just saw. It's Black Friday week because it's Thanksgiving Day week. So we're doing a promo right now for Black Friday, 50% off your first month with BF 2024. This gives you access to all the tools, as we just saw, the chalkboard, the cheat sheets. And this is for all sports. So NBA, NFL, college football. We just had a 50K takedown this past weekend. MLB when it's in season and more. So this gives you 50% off your first month. I'll put the link in the video description. That's going to do it for this cash lineup review. We'll see y'all next week.
Big time, no man, diamonds in my teeth, I got a lot of shine.